Hi, I'm Bryce Crittenden.
Hi, I'm Caroline Land, and welcome back to EPL's Overdue Finds.
Caroline, it is our Christmas episode. How's it going today?
It's very good. I'm very looking forward to this episode. It's one we've been talking about doing practically all year, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big fan of Christmas, and Caroline, I think it's safe to assume you are also a huge fan of Christmas, aren't you?
Agreed. Yes.
Yeah. So today, the last couple of years on Christmas, we've talked about Christmas Carol was one episode. Another one we talked about just kind of in general our favorite Christmas movies. But I think we can both agree that one of the all-time greatest Christmas movies, though, is It's a Wonderful Life. And that's what we're going to be chatting about today. We've come upon another pop culture anniversary, just like on our last episode. It's the 75th anniversary of It's a Wonderful Life. And we thought, hey, for our Christmas episode, this is absolutely perfect to be chatting about today, right?
Yes, and this is probably the closest I'm going to get to my much wanted 1919 time capsule episode talking about a movie from 1946. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and joining us today, we've got a couple of great guests joining us. First, I want to welcome back to the show. He was last on the podcast. I can't believe it's been this long. 2 years ago on our horror movie episode. And he's also the co-host of his own podcast, a great podcast called I Love This, You Should Too. Welcome back to the show, Indy Randhawa. Indy, how are you today?
Doing pretty good. Doing my best to be very festive and get in the Christmas spirit. But now I've been derailed about thinking about doing a 1919 podcast. Because when you do that, call me. Let me know. I have some thoughts.
All of our hot pop culture takes from the year 1919.
It was a great year for German filmmaking, just saying.
Yes, that's right. And also joining us today, a member of the Overdue Finds family, editor extraordinaire, and she was actually last on our episode back in June called While You Wait, where we were talking about some of the titles you can borrow while you wait for some of your holds to come in. Please welcome back to the show, Camilla Fita. Camilla, how are you today?
I'm doing really good.
And it's funny because when we meet, we as a podcast, like there's like a team of us, like 6 of us, and we meet once a quarter and we go over episode ideas. And we're going to get into this a little bit later on, but I believe you said that you kind of had a hot take regarding It's a Wonderful Life, right?
I believe I did. I wanted to make the case that I don't think it's a Christmas movie, or it doesn't have to be just a Christmas movie. I think it can be enjoyed year-round. That's my lukewarm take.
I will say it's funny because I watched it again yesterday afternoon. We'll get into this a little bit later on, but you make a really interesting point because I'm watching this movie and it's like, I don't know, maybe at the hour 20 mark or something. And then it just dawned on me. I was like, there's been not a single mention of Christmas. It's not winter. Absolutely nothing. We are still at the Bailey Brothers lone place. So yeah, we'll get into all that here in a little bit. But before we do, let's go over our recent Overdue Finds picks. Indy, what have you been enjoying lately?
Well, lately I've been working my way through the Wong Kar-wai box set that the Criterion Collection put out. It's a Blu-ray box set that all of them are available at EPL, but I watched a lot of these movies as a teenager, and I was very happy to see this new release, and Chungking Express being maybe my favorite movie ever made. So it's a big statement, but I rewatched it recently with this release, and I think it might be.
So I've heard of the movie Chungking Express. Can you let listeners and myself know a little bit more about the movie? Because like I said, the title sounds familiar, but I know for a fact I've never seen it before.
So it's a bizarre movie in a lot of ways. It's from Hong Kong, was originally released in 1994. And at the beginning, you have characters from seemingly different movies almost. Like Takeshi Kaneshiro plays this John Cusack, sad sack, lovelorn type guy, and he's straight out of a romantic comedy. and then he has a run-in with Bridget Lynn, who is in a crime drama, and they're not aware of each other's previous activities throughout this movie. And just when you get comfortable with that, the story completely switches, and it then becomes a like postmodern love story between two of the most charming people you're ever going to see on screen in Faye Wong and Tony Leung. And it's just a really stylish movie, and I think that's what Wong Kar-wai gets the most notoriety for. But I feel personally that he's never stylish for the sake of being stylish, but rather he's just a kind of guy who this is how he truly sees the world, and he's just trying to share that with everyone else. And it's like beautiful in the colors and the soundtrack, and it slyly incorporates a lot of metaphorical stuff into it, which is always fun for a film nerd like me. And it's kind of like quirkily comedic and cathartically romantic. It's mysterious. It's poetic. It's just a lot of things, and it's a really beautiful movie, I think.
Nice. So what are some of the other movies in that box set that have you seen all of them in the box set, or is there some in particular that you're really looking forward to watching?
I have seen them all, but I haven't seen them all in this new remastered high definition format. I think my other favorite would probably be In the Mood for Love, which is it's a romantic movie, but it's quite solemn and sad and beautiful to look at, like a lot of his movies are. And then there's a kind of sequel to it called 2046, which incorporates sci-fi elements, but still this quiet, sad romanticism throughout.
I have to say, I'm also a sucker too for seeing like remastered stuff. And it's like, whoa, I can watch whatever movie it is. I remember a couple of years ago, I got a remastered version of RoboCop on Blu-ray for Christmas. And I was so pumped up because I had it on DVD, and the DVD looked fine. The movie came out in 1987, but I'm like, oh, I must get this remastered. So I'm with you. I love those remastered movies.
And when it's well done, it makes a difference. And I think that's the case with these ones.
Absolutely. Camilla, how about you? What have you been enjoying lately?
So, kind of keeping in the movie theme, I like movies, but I actually prefer reading about movies than actually watching them. I'll watch them, but give me a book about a movie and I'm there. So I am reading, haven't finished yet, is Leave the Gun, Take the Cannoli, which is the epic story of the making of The Godfather by Mark Seal, who's a Vanity Fair author. And yeah, it's really great. I also have another take. To me, The Godfather is a Christmas movie. So
It's a Wonderful Life is out and The Godfather's in.
But I was thinking about this. I think I associate like if I'm watching a movie while I'm putting up Christmas decorations, it becomes a de facto Christmas movie. So I think that Godfather was the first time I saw it. We were putting up Christmas decorations. And same with The Irishman a couple of years ago. I was like, oh, this is perfect. It's long. And so it just gets melded into my brain. So yeah, so Godfather, it's a great book. Obviously, like the behind the scenes dramatics are, delicious and hilarious. Big cast of characters. My favorite is the mobster. I'm blanking on his name at the moment. He was in the mafia in the States, and he was worried that this movie would portray Italian Americans in a bad light. For someone actually in the mafia, he was worried about this movie, and he had started like an anti-defamation Italian league, and him and his son, and they were like picketing the movie and stuff. So I don't know. I thought was an interesting character moment of real life.
Wow. I imagine he was really disappointed when, we got movies like Donnie Brasco later on and Goodfellas and the two other sequels to The Godfather as well.
Yeah, I think he was assassinated because of it. It was an occupational hazard, I believe. Yeah. But yeah, I'm sure. But actually, no, it goes into kind of more how they Because it's funny. Well, I mean, I'm sure for people who are, knowledgeable about movie history, especially American movie history, there is a lot of cross ties with the mafia and the movie production for sure. So it goes into that, and people who used to be in the mafia became, went to Hollywood and vice versa. It's really, really interesting. So
I read somewhere that I think they're actually turning that book into a movie. Because I recall before he was canceled, I think Armie Hammer was scheduled to play, I don't know who it was, maybe Robert Evans or somebody like that, and then they obviously had to recast it. But I think it might be coming out next year or something like that. So either way, The Godfather is one of my all-time favorite movies, so I clearly need to read that book, and I'll be looking forward to the movie.
Yeah.
Caroline, how about you?
I have, over the course of this year, spent a fair amount of time reading a number of books on leadership and management. Here at EPL, there's a real culture of getting into the practice of leadership and wanting to find out how to grow and develop skills. I have been telling everyone about this book that I just finished. It is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. So it is, yes, it is a business book that is not very long. It's all about building effective teams, how teams work together, and it's told through a fable. And the fable is about this new executive who is hired by a Silicon Valley startup. And so she starts and she joins a team, and the team is totally dysfunctional. So she takes them on this work retreat to a Napa winery. And then the rest of the story is just basically their staff meetings. And there is so much suspense in this story. There is so much drama. The characters, I'm pretty sure Lencioni even wove in a secret romance subplot that if you read closely, I think is there. But the way the concepts are explained is so understandable, and it's a fun read. And I was honestly messaging people when I was going, and it's there's a cliffhanger here about someone who's gonna be fired, and I don't know what's gonna happen. And they were like, "Okay, Caroline," but seriously, I highly recommend The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni.
That actually sounds pretty good. There's been a few kind of business type books over the years that I've tried to get into, and I can't. It's a genre that I want to read, but I can never get into it. I don't find them to be that enthralling. But that one actually sounds really good. There's it sounds like there's some high stakes
Oh yeah.
in the book.
Yeah, and it's this startup. She's been brought in. She has the confidence of the board, but not of the staff. The former CEO and startup runner is still there. There's the finance person. There's the IT person. There's the person who makes little comments underneath her breath that get in the way of team bonding. I highly recommend.
Well, it's interesting, Caroline. We do have an Overdue Finds team meeting here in a couple days. So are you going to be incorporating some of that into our next team meeting?
I would love to. I don't know that we have that many dysfunctions because I think we've worked through many of them, but I am hoping to use the skills that I learned from this and other books.
Well, Bryce and I will be incorporating things we learned from The Godfather at our meeting.
That's right.
Which ones work better?
This is going to be a very interesting meeting.
Yeah.
So Bryce, what have you been enjoying?
Well, it's funny, Camilla, we were talking about The Godfather, and I have a mafia pick myself this week. So quick question to everybody here today. Anybody here a fan of The Sopranos?
I never watched it.
Same.
Indy, I see you kind of nodding.
Yeah, I watched it through once after the run was over and enjoyed it quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so my pick today, it's not the actual TV show The Sopranos, but earlier this fall there was a movie that came out. It was a prequel movie called The Many Saints of Newark. Indy, have you seen this one yet?
No, I'm not aware of this.
Yeah, so it just came out on DVD, so you can put your name down to there's lots of holds on it right now, but put your name down, you'll get it very shortly. But yeah, this one, as a huge fan of The Sopranos and pretty much all mob movies, I was all in on this one. So when I heard that they were going to be doing a prequel to The Sopranos that shows a young Tony Soprano, yeah, I was buying my ticket to go see this one at the theater. While we do get to see a young Tony Soprano in the movie actually focuses on Dickie Moltisanti, who isn't in the series. But for those of you who did watch the series, that's actually Christopher's father. So Christopher was Tony's nephew in the movie. We see how much of an influence that Dickie has on a young Tony, and how Dickie really struggles with trying to keep kind of Tony on the right path. Of course, there's parts in the movie where you're like, Tony, don't go do that. But we all know kind of what happens to Tony Soprano. So I really enjoyed this movie, but it's funny, I'm recommending this, but I'm recommending it to kind of I don't want to say the diehard Sopranos fans. Like, if you're a fan of the series, I think you will enjoy this movie. My only complaint about this, though, is I wish there was more to it. We kind of end on a little bit of a cliffhanger. I was glad I saw it in the theater, but at the same time, I think this would almost kind of translate better as maybe a new series, because there's lots, and maybe that was kind of the original intent of the movie. Let's see how popular this is first, and then maybe we'll either make another movie or turn this into a mini series or something. But there's still some untold stories here when the movie ends. But it does a nice job of kind of bridging The Many Saints of Newark and The Sopranos. But like I said, I'm recommending it, but I kind of wish there was more to it. So today I'm so excited about this conversation because this is a movie I could talk for days about. Of course, we are talking about It's a Wonderful Life, the classic 1946 movie directed by Frank Capra. Caroline, normally I do this part, but today I believe you actually have some fun facts for us regarding It's a Wonderful Life, don't we?
Yes, I couldn't let you have all the fun with these facts. So, as you said, directed by Frank Capra, stars James Stewart, which seems oddly formal, as George Bailey, a man who is considering suicide on Christmas Eve. I should say spoilers. Let's just put in spoilers at the top for It's a Wonderful Life from here on out.
You've only had 75 years to watch the movie, but we will do a
spoiler alert.
Yeah. So he is then visited by his guardian angel, Clarence, who shows him what things would be like if he had never been born. This was Jimmy Stewart's first post-World War II movie. During the war, he had been a pilot in the Air Force. When it was first released, it received mixed reviews and was only a moderate box office success, and didn't earn back enough to be considered to have made a profit. Liberty Films, which was Frank Capra's production company, made only this movie and one other movie before it closed due to lack of funds. It's a Wonderful Life was nominated for 5 Oscars, including Picture, Director, and Actor. It lost all of them, and those 3 main ones went to The Best Years of Our Lives, which was another post-World War II movie. In 1974, the copyright for It's a Wonderful Life lapsed, and it began to be shown on TV every year because it was an inexpensive option for TV stations to put on the air. The rights became somewhat complicated because while the movie fell out of copyright, it is a derivative work based on the original short story, The Greatest Gift, which was still under copyright. Eventually, they solved the problem with money, and NBC acquired the exclusive US television rights and has been airing it on TV ever since. So that's a little summary.
Yeah, it is always interesting. I love hearing about those kind of movies like that, where it's like just kind of out in the public domain, and like I believe Night of the Living Dead is like that, where it's just like the copyright is like lapsed on it, or I think with Night of the Living Dead, somebody just did something wrong at the beginning, and it's always been out in the public domain. But yeah, it just kind of goes to show it's interesting to see like what movies released today maybe aren't considered, like they were maybe considered box office bombs, or they just weren't liked with critics, and that, you know, there's got to be the next It's a Wonderful Life out there somewhere. But I have to ask everybody though, what did you think of it when you first watched it, Indy?
You know what? I can't even pinpoint my first viewing of this movie because it's so ubiquitous. It's kind of like it's just always there. And I don't think I sat down and watched it from front to beginning or from beginning to end until quite recently. I think it's just something as a kid that would be on TV and you're like, oh yeah, this is the black and white one. And then an angel gets its wings. And you just kind of know those touchstones. And I kind of thought of it as just a Christmas movie and being overly sentimental. And my views have drastically changed, which we'll talk about later. But I wasn't a big fan of it as a child because it was just a movie that was there.
Yeah.
Camilla, can you relate?
110%. Although probably the reason why I wasn't interested was strictly because it was in black and white. So like as a kid, I just needed color and movement and motion. And so, yeah, something that was black and white kind of just did not hold my interest whatsoever. And then I think there was probably a period where, yeah, it's one of those things that is considered a classic. And I just was like, like whatever, I'm sure it's, you know, kind of modeling or yeah, like I would have thought, yeah, I get the beats, like, you know, something happens. I don't even know if there was an angel, to be honest. Like I just was like, I don't know, someone finds the meaning of Christmas somewhere, right? Like that, you know. And yeah, I didn't really sit down. I want to say probably within the last, I was definitely an adult. And then like from the beginning, and there's a few scenes in the beginning that are just like really like, I'm like, oh, this is something different than I thought. And then, yeah, watched it all and just absolutely adore it. And we'll talk about it. And I will talk about my conversion too. But I always assume other people, I'm like, just because it's black and white, don't worry. And everyone's like, no, I've watched black and white.
I've got a similar story too. Like I never watched it as a kid. I like knew of it. But same thing, like it was in black and white. And as far as I knew, Santa Claus wasn't in it or anything. So I had zero interest in it. I kind of knew, like, I don't think it, like at first when I watched it, like Gremlins, I was a big fan of. And I remember in Gremlins, you see like as the mom is watching TV, there's some scenes from It's a Wonderful Life in there. And that's where I kind of knew about the movie a little bit. But yeah, I also didn't watch it until I was an adult as well. And I think I bought it even on DVD. It was like on sale, maybe a Boxing Day, and it was like, heard this movie's good, and let's just buy it and see what I think of it. And yeah, I love it. It's like one of my favorite Christmas movies now to watch. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff in there that I mean, I'll go there right now. Like during the very kind of the opening 20 minutes or so, when we see a young George Bailey working at the pharmacy, or back in those days, apparently pharmacists were known as druggists. I think this is what the movie was telling us. And like George prevents his boss from poisoning a boy with some pills because he was distraught because this guy found out that his son had died in the war, I believe. And and then like the pharmacist just goes off and he like slaps George in like the side of the head. And apparently, I was reading this yesterday, apparently that was like a legit slap, and like you could see blood coming out of his ear, and apparently that was like actually real. So the movie gets really intense at the very beginning. So despite all of that, it is a fun movie to watch. Caroline, was this something you watched as a child and then kind of grew up watching later on?
I think I knew it most as a story type as a child, probably because I watched a lot of television. And this, along with A Christmas Carol, would make the framework for a lot of television shows' Christmas episodes. This idea of, what things would be like if you were never born, and like there might be an angel or a character or some twist that will like pop in, and they'll all learn a lesson before the end of the episode. So it was definitely something that I knew of. Um, so remember it airing on NBC, seeing it on TV all the time. I've talked in the past about my American Film Institute 100 Greatest Movies list. This was one of them, so I definitely watched it then, but haven't really appreciated it until now when I was rewatching it over the weekend. Bryce, that scene too, where the poor little boy is getting like hit in the ears, and he's just saying, "Not my ear, not my hurt ear." And I was like, oh, we're like 10 minutes into the movie at this point. I'm like, oh, what did I get myself into at that point?
Yeah, nice light family viewing, a little child abuse to start things off.
Yeah, we kind of always forget this movie starts with attempted suicide, alcoholism, and child abuse.
Yeah, of course.
Near death incidents. I mean, they are sledding right down the hill into an open pond. There are choices in this movie for sure.
All of these are pillars for a great family movie.
Yeah. So as Bryce said off the top, when we reached out to both of you, Camilla, you had mentioned you had this history with It's a Wonderful Life. I think Indy, when I emailed you, you wrote back and was like, yes, I'm in. I have all these things. What are some of your It's a Wonderful Life hot takes? I want to know. 75 years, it's building right to this moment.
The proposal scene between George and Mary, I think, is one of the most romantic scenes. Even though there's such intense emotion, because it's, he loves her, he wants to, and that also those were those scenes where I was like, oh, this isn't like some, happy, jolly Christmas movie where you learn a lesson. So George's I guess suppressed desire to travel, right? Or his kind of desire, his juggling between, duty to his family versus just going off is just present kind of in every moment. And then also present throughout, at the beginning of the scene, is Mary's love of him, when she whispers in his bad ear that she loves him, and it's his bad ear, that's amazing. It's so sweet. And then they rediscover each other, and then they go to that dance, and then there's that weird pool, that gym floor that opens up, which is a thing. It's a real high school.
Yeah, I think it's still there at I think it's Beverly Hills High, I want to say.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine. I wonder if I'm sure there are stringent do not touch, because I imagine that kind of setup for around teens, that's just rife with pranks and stuff. But yeah, and then the scene where he wants to leave, but he loves her, and he's warring with himself, and she's just she painted him or drew him that little picture, and she's trying to set the scene to reconnect their little inside jokes. And then her mother's mad because her mother does not want her to hitch her wagon to him. Oh, and he's just so angry, and she's angry too. I don't know, that's my hot take. That's one of the most romantic scenes.
Mary's mother, she wants absolutely nothing to do with the Baileys, really. She's just so disappointed. Even that scene after they kind of do a flash forward and after they get married, and she's crying, and not in a good way, as they're driving away in the cab to go on their honeymoon. But yeah, that George Bailey, he's a no good Nick. Indy, how about you? You mentioned too, you got some hot takes on this movie, right?
I do, but it seems like my hot take isn't as hot as I thought about it just being not the movie we thought it was. But before that, I also, that scene that Camilla was talking about was a scene that I always disliked, but now appreciate a lot. Because it's when George goes to Mary's house, he's in a terrible mood and he's taking it out on her. And there's so many romantic comedies that go with the premise of the guy's a jerk and the woman for some reason really loves it. And it's very bothersome to me that that happens so much. And I kind of chalked this up to the same thing, but I realized that it's not that. And when they kiss at the end, like I'm with you. It works. It's there's something visceral about it because I think it's that he's doing all of this against his will, like his entire life, and this entire story is about all these things that he's forced to give up and to put his own dreams on hold to do something to help others. And this appears to be the first time where he's putting what he thought his dreams were on hold, what he thought his dreams were on hold for something that he himself wants. And I think it's like you can see in Stewart's performance that it's tearing him up inside to know that he's giving up on what he thought he wanted his entire life to for someone that he now realizes is more important than all of that. And yeah, so that scene has gone from my least favorite scene to one of my very favorites.
I was watching it yesterday with Cheryl, and she was like, "This is, I guess, maybe this is my wife's hot take on the movie," and she was like, "You know, if it wasn't for Uncle Billy, they wouldn't be in this situation right now. Like, really, like old man Potter, first of all, is a total jerk and just taking the money. But really, Uncle Billy, like, kind of a screw up here. And if it wasn't for, if Uncle Billy was a little bit more responsible, like, he would have been appointed the head of Bailey Brothers Buildings and Loan." And then it wouldn't have also had to go to George, and he could have gone off on his adventure and everything. But Uncle Billy is total screw up.
That scene, the scene in the board meeting after George's father has passed away. It's now 3 months. They've got everything in order. He has a cab downstairs. He has a cab downstairs in like every scene of this movie. But he's ready to go on start his life outside of Bedford Falls, and as the scene builds and then ends up with him being kind of forced to take over the building and loan, it's just it's like it's built on quicksand. And it's just like slipping out from underneath him. It is such a hard scene because even if when he, I mean, I knew where things were going, but even as you're watching it for the first time, you're just realizing how different his life is going to be from what he thought it was. And to have that coming right after one of my favorite scenes, which is the dance and then walking home with Mary, and having just kind of that lightheartedness to go from that to just everything slipping away in that moment, was just heartbreaking.
It kind of reminded me, the one scene too that I kind of, for me, was kind of almost the most heartbreaking was, so he's been holding down the building and loan during the Second World War, and his brother Harry, I believe, he was, so of course he's this big decorated war hero. He's coming home to get I believe it's like, I don't remember what it is. It's like Medal of Honor or whatever. And so he meets him at the train station, finds out that he's married, which kind of cracks me up because the family seems really tight. Like the whole Bailey family, and the fact that he just got married without letting any of his family know, I thought was kind of weird. But when his brother when he finds out that his brother already has this other job lined up, and meanwhile George this whole time was just like, I'm just keeping the seat warm for Harry. When he's back, he's going to take this over, and I'm going to be able to go travel with my wife, and we're going to be able to go do these things. And then that just never happens for him. All right, so the past couple episodes leading up to this, I've been waiting to talk about Pottersville. But before I do you have any favorite scenes or characters in this movie, Indy?
I think since I answered the hot take question with my favorite scene, I've formulated a new hot take because I was thinking that, oh, I'm going to come in and say, like, this movie's not the Christmas movie you think it is. And then, of course, all four of you mentioned, this isn't the Christmas movie you think it is. But my new hot take is that George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life and someone like Jack Torrance from The Shining or Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver are not as far apart as we may think. Because I was wondering, like, why do I love It's a Wonderful Life? Because a lot of my other favorite things are like those movies. My favorite novel is probably Jude the Obscure. And all of these things are very dark movies and books for the most part. But they share a lot in common with It's a Wonderful Life, I'm realizing now that I think about it. Because all of those movies and books have a protagonist who is just kind of at the end of the rope. They are in dire straits and they're willing to do something drastic. And I feel like if Clarence had intervened with Travis Bickle, maybe Taxi Driver would have a happier ending, and that would be the family favorite that we love now. But unfortunately, Clarence wasn't available that day, and maybe he was busy saving Jimmy Stewart, and that's why this movie has gained the following it has and the reputation it has. But really, a lot of those characters, the character traits that Bailey has in this are usually not for feel good movies, but maybe that's the power of this movie. It's able to take all of those like terrible, tragic things and still have it be a feel good movie in the end somehow.
I was reading an article from the Boston Herald, which published it, I think, in 2018, and they were writing about how dark this movie is. And one line that really stuck out to me was there are movies with hockey masks and chainsaws that have happier endings. And their kind of takeaway from it was that yes, the scene at the end when they're coming forward with the money, they're saving George, he's had this kind of change, is actually not that happy of an ending because nothing has really changed. It gets him through the crisis of the moment, but I mean, Mr. Potter is still running his empire. The house is still drafty, and the children are sick. You know, Uncle, what was Uncle's name?
Billy?
Uncle
Uncle Billy.
Billy. You know, today he lost $8,000. What's he gonna do tomorrow? You know, it kind of it's this idea of like it's a happy ending because the movie stops right there.
So it's interesting you bring that up because it made me think of the other day. There's this great scene or skit from SNL. I believe it came out in 1990, I want to say. And basically it's like, hey, everybody, we've unearthed the secret alternate ending to It's a Wonderful Life. So the fun alternate ending that they do on SNL is it's like the same as the movie, but then all of a sudden Uncle Billy comes in and he realizes, he's like, hey, I remember what I did with the $8,000 now. I accidentally put it in the newspaper and old man Potter has it. He has our money. So like all these people who are in the Bailey house, they get like their pitchforks together and they go down to Mr. Potter's office and they like break down the door and they demand the money back. And George, there's a line that made me laugh. Dana Carvey is playing George Bailey, does a great James Stewart impression. He goes, "You made one mistake, Mr. Potter. You double-crossed me and left me alive." And so basically it's like George like brings him up out of his wheelchair and punches him, and Mary comes over and stomps on him, and it basically really gives like that fake alternate ending. It's almost a better ending because at least Potter gets what's coming to him. Like, yeah, the guy's already rich and he is clearly stolen $8,000, which in 2021 dollars is probably like, I don't know, like probably over like $100,000 easily. So that we'll link to that. It's on YouTube. We will link to that in our today's show notes. But that part always cracked me up though.
I just want to give a round of appreciation, which is not a phrase, but it should be, to Violet. as a character, I just love her. She, as the little girl, when she first comes in and tries to catch George's attention in the drugstore, the scene where she's walking down the street in the dress that she puts on when she doesn't care about how she looks. She's just got a great energy, and she was not the right match for George necessarily, but as a character, I'd like to see more of Violet.
Yeah, the scene in Pottersville, which, by the way, I will not go on an hour-long tangent about Pottersville because I absolutely love that whole scene. But yeah, there's that scene in Pottersville where George sees her and is like, "Yeah, that's Violet." Like, I know Violet as they're like dragging Violet out of a club because, I don't know, she's drunk or something. But yeah, just that whole Pottersville scene. I just want to quickly touch on it because so it reminds me a lot of, the scene in Back to the Future Part 2 where they go to alternate 1985 and we see like Biff's casino. Like, this is what it reminds me of. So like, this is the scene where, of course, George gets to see really what life would be like in Bedford Falls if he had never been born. And of course, Mr. Potter's taken over Bedford Falls and is now known as Pottersville. And it's so funny because compared to like Bedford Falls is this like squeaky clean every town America, like everybody knows each other, they're saying hi, the town is so clean and everything. But this time though in Pottersville, there's drinking, there's gambling, there's burlesque, everybody's dancing. It is a town full of debauchery. And probably the best part of it is when we get to go to the Pottersville Public Library. And there where we see George is like, "Where's Mary? Like, where's my wife?"
Yeah.
And he goes there. And then we see somebody before that, though, George is asking about her. And somebody refers to her basically as she's an old maid. And they go to the Pottersville Public Library. And there's Mary working as like the spinster librarian, locking up for the day. She sees George and she's just like, like screaming in terror as this crazy man is trying to convince her that he is her husband. So that is my absolute favorite part of the movie.
Yeah, I think it, yeah, for sure. That's like a famous kind of librarian in pop culture character, the ultimate Mary, who's like resigned to a fate worse than death, apparently.
Yeah.
But I think it's, the angel kind of shows him like not just the changes that would have been made kind of to the direct kind of scenes or direct actions in his life. So if he hadn't been born, he wouldn't have saved his brother. So his brother, just those really, and in the pharmacy, he wouldn't have been there to stop it. So those are obviously, you can see like how direct they are. But I think the scenes with the town just shows how influential he is kind of in the community, which I mean, I don't think he probably realized as much. And kind of how that would have sort of kind of spread and trickled throughout, like the debauchery, the drinking, and even the color. It's black and white, but just like it's shadowy, it's darker, and then of course the ultimate terrible fate of Mary.
I love that his brother's dead and his uncle's institutionalized, but worst of all, his wife's a librarian.
Yeah.
That kind of hurt a little bit, but that's all right.
And knowing what we know about Mr. Potter, I was surprised that they even had a public library. Like, right. We got the Pottersville Public Library. I wouldn't think really public funds would be going to something like that. I kind of thought maybe that money would be kind of kicked back to Mr. Potter. So that was one pleasant surprise about Pottersville for me.
Maybe that's where we need to take the story next. If they revisit the story of Pottersville, it can be the origin of how they got the political capital to erect a public library.
Yeah.
I'm scared. I wonder if like libraries are actually part of like a bad alternate reality. Like maybe Bedford Falls had like some kind of like every house had a collection of books or something, and then this like front for like for Potter's. I don't know, maybe he was laundering money and he decided to donate it. And yeah, maybe that. Now I'm scared. What if we're in Pottersville?
Somebody needs to write a Pottersville spinoff.
Yes, that's for sure.
Indy, did you have any favorite characters from the movie?
I think my favorite performance is just Jimmy Stewart because, well, it's his movie and he carries it. But Zuzu is always she's a crowd pleaser, and with good reason.
Yeah, that scene where he comes home and he's all angry, he can't find the money and everything, and he's just like he's going off on like absolutely everybody. And the one line kind of cracks me up where he's like, "Why did we have to have all these kids?" And just that scene though, where he does go up to Zuzu's room and kind of almost, I don't want to say it calms him down because he gets on the phone with the teacher and kind of gives her a piece of his mind. But we do see that, at least we do see that lighter side of him in that scene. And he genuinely, obviously, he was saying like, why do we have to have all these kids? But like, he clearly loves his family and would do absolutely anything for them. But that is such a great scene.
And I love the child logic of Zuzu not doing her coat-up because she doesn't want to crush her flower, and then not wanting to go to sleep because she's too busy looking at a flower. And the only way to get her to go to sleep is like, well, you could dream about the flower. And she's like, okay, yeah, I'm on board with that.
It's like, that works.
Why do you think that this movie has become such a Christmas classic?
Actually, you know what? I was thinking about this, especially in relation to kind of like other at least the Christmas movies I've associated, like definitely The Godfather. Goodfellas 2 to me is a great Christmas. I think it is. Same with, like The Irishman or something. But I was trying to think, like, is this just me and my addled brain that's like just associates like anything I'm watching when there's a Christmas tree up, it's like de facto. But I think those kind of, first of all, movies with like that kind of go over like a long timeline and kind of are very kind of like scene based, and sort of, because there is sort of a timelessness to Christmas, like, or for people who celebrate to the holiday, like, you're bringing out kind of the same decorations. There's obviously a lot of like history around the ornaments, and it's just the same things every year. And so there is this kind of timelessness to this one event in the year. And so I think these kind of movies that are sort of life spanning, even though they don't like we said, It's a Wonderful Life, the Christmas really only comes in the present day. I don't think there's any Christmas scenes when he's younger and stuff. But yeah, so I think in that sense, there's this kind of timelessness. There is kind of Christmas sort of takes, at least for me, takes me out of time a little bit, right? Because they seem all the same sometimes. So I think those kind of multi-set pieces kind of across like a lifetime or a large span of time really lend themselves, I think, to Christmas classics.
I think there's an underlying theme in this movie that really resonates. I think it was really appropriate for the time, but probably wasn't appreciated because they don't have the hindsight to see how appropriate it was. But this came out at a time where everyone is just coming back from war and probably feeling pretty lost. I mean, Jimmy Stewart himself had served, and I think now we would diagnose him with PTSD, but at the time they were saying he was shell-shocked. And the theme that resonates, I think, is one of the meaningfulness of sacrifice. Because George Bailey is shown that his sacrifices meant something, which was probably a really important message for all of these people who are coming back from what they had seen or done in war. And it resonates a lot more than something as simple as like, well, everything worked out and now we're happy. It kind of reminds me of Judy Garland's Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas from Meet Me in St. Louis, which I think was only a year or two before this. And there's that line about we'll have to muddle through somehow. And I feel like that's a line for the George Baileys of the world. The message of this movie isn't something about like how everything is great with the Christmas spirit or you can do anything. It's more about we can get through anything and we will persevere. it kind of takes a different look at the heroism. It's about the quiet sacrifice and like the solemn determination that George Bailey has. And I think that's why George Bailey and Charlie Brown, like Charlie Brown's Christmas is kind of the same thing. They're not these big epic feel-goods like we kind of group them with. They're these movies about we can get by with what we have. And I think for people who aren't fully on board with Christmas a lot of the time, George Bailey and Charlie Brown are their heroes, right? They're the heroes for like not everything's the greatest, but you know what? We can get by with what we have. And it's an underrated message, and it's a message that you don't see a lot. So maybe it's kind of cornered the market between those two movies on this this very specific Christmas message.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something there that's really resonating with my understanding of my own viewing habits and watching it. I do not like sad Christmas stuff. That's not what I want to watch. And this isn't that to me, which sounds very strange. I mean, I was saying that I was getting upset over him getting his ear boxed in the beginning, and there's all of this death and sacrifice and everything, and but it's the ending too. I think that the ending is grand enough to make the rest of the movie worth it. So for me, when I'm watching it, it's not just 2 hours of terrible things happening to someone and then a Christmas song at the end. It's this redemptive ending that pulls it together, and yeah, maybe his life isn't going to be smooth from here on out, but that's okay because he got through the other bits and he'll get through this as well.
And I think because the ending isn't perfect, like Potter is still out there and he's still going to be terrible, it's that much more believable because of course Potter's still out there and of course he's still terrible. Not everything is fixed, and that kind of grounds it in reality to me.
Bryce, before we get to our roundtable questions, can you let everyone know what we'll be chatting about on our next episode, which will be available on Friday, December 31st?
Yeah, in addition to our Christmas episode, our year-end episode is also one of my favorite ones that we do. So yeah, we're doing our annual Best of the Year. We're going to be sharing our picks for the best books, movies, music, and games. Joining us, as is tradition with all of our Best of the Year episodes, is librarian Nancy Chung. And joining us for the first time will be Milner branch manager Richard Thornley. And we'll also be sharing our picks for our Overdue Finds Person of the Year. Caroline, I have no idea who I'm going to be picking for that.
I almost took that question out of the outline because I didn't have an answer ready. But then I thought, no, Caroline, you have to hold yourself to journalistic standards a bit more rigorously.
The public demands to know who we're picking. All right, so let's move into our roundtable questions. Let's face it, this will absolutely happen one day. If you were the casting director for a remake of It's a Wonderful Life, who would you cast as George Bailey? Indy, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I guess the first clear answer would be don't. But if I have to, I'm going to go Donald Glover as George Bailey. I feel like he walks a good line of being hilarious. He can do dramatic stuff. I think he's very versatile. And then I kind of went ahead and filled out the world a little bit and put Danny Glover as Uncle Billy. Of course, there's no relation there, but Danny Glover's like kind of resurgence has been this as an older man, I've liked the roles he's taken. And then let's go with Alec Baldwin as Potter, because he essentially plays that character in a bunch of things already. And let's throw Zooey Deschanel as the new Mary.
I like it. I think everybody would still be offended that they're even remaking it, but I like that cast so far. Camilla, how about you?
I thought about this, I think, way too long. I wanted to come up with like the perfect answer, and so I only focused on George Bailey. and going back to that scene or the scenes of him, and especially the proposal scene, or when they connect, just that kind of like simmering kind of rage, but also there needs to be a charm, because George Bailey, there's charm, right? He charms Mary. He's obviously very loved by his family and his community. So I came up with two because like I said, really overthought this. So I've mentioned him before, I think on my last guest appearance on this podcast, because he can absolutely wear the heck out of a creamy cashmere sweater, and that's Steven Yeun, because I think he has that wonderful kind of family dad charm. But if you've seen him, especially in Burning, he has that kind of, although his character in Burning is a lot different than George Bailey, he does have that kind of simmering sort of, like that tension. And the other one that I thought of, because I realized I really have to update my mental Rolodex of current actors, because I was like, George Clooney, like he's 60, like I just, it's kind of frozen. But the other one I thought of was Adam Driver. Also has that kind of like charm as well. A little bit of that aloofness, but also that kind of simmering kind of undercurrent as well. So those are my two kind of academic choices. Like I said, I was really thinking about this. Like I took it very seriously.
Yeah, I could see Adam Driver, like in particular, talking about getting out of this town and kind of getting short with Mary. So two great picks there. Caroline, how about you? What did you pick?
I'm feeling so good right now because both Donald Glover and Steve Yeun were on my short list on this, and very similar to Camilla, I literally Googled Hollywood actors. No, what did I say on there? I think it was just like actors in their 30s, and thinking like that was it. And I got a list of like 200 actors and was just scrolling through to see who had the qualities I was looking for, because you're right. It's not George Bailey, there are these sacrifices, there are these hardships, but he also has successes. And like that, those highs, those victories are then what make the times when like he loses it that much, that so bittersweet, right? Like he's riding the high of his wedding, and then it's the Great Depression right afterwards. But he has those victories. And so I went with Michael B. Jordan, because he has that strength to have those moments, but I can see that sacrificing quality in his work. My gut answer, my second choice, was Liam Hemsworth. And I don't know why, but I might fight for him if I were the casting director. Yeah, George Bailey might need to take up, I don't know, some kind of like workout regimen.
That's right.
Became important to the people of Bedford Falls. Bryce, who are you casting?
I also probably thought way too long and hard about this one. At first, too, very similar to you, Camilla. I was like, Tom Hanks would be great for this. 25 years ago, yes, or 30 years ago, absolutely. Not so much now, but the one actor that came to my mind, and I don't think obviously as many audiences know about him, probably just remember him mostly from SNL. I would actually go with Bill Hader as my George Bailey. For if anybody has watched the HBO series Barry, which is excellent, and I totally recommend you check that out. He's got this, I think Bill Hader has this great kind of everyman type quality to him. He can be funny, and in Barry, quite serious if need be. So I think Bill Hader would be amazing for it. So that would be my pick if I'm doing the daunting task of trying to cast a remake of It's a Wonderful Life.
This is hard because I don't want that to happen, but I want to see all of these movies.
I just want to see all of our George Baileys all get together and make some sort of movie where they're all just very charming.
Although this feels a little bit like an SNL skit itself, right? Where like you've got cast members doing impressions of other actors doing George Bailey.
So last question. It's Overdue finds Christmas episode 75 years from now. Caroline, I picture it kind of being like Futurama, where it's just my head and, both of our heads are in like a jar and we're just kind of literally talking heads. So what Christmas movie do you think we'll be talking about in the year 2096? Kind of give or take a few years there.
I'm going to go with maybe my favorite Christmas movie, In The Nightmare Before Christmas. And I think there's a lot of reasons that it could have longevity, because people are more forgiving to the aging of non-live action films. And plus there's kind of a tradition of claymation and Christmas going together, so it kind of keeps that going. And it's a fantasy world, so it's not really rooted to any one time. You can't look at it and say like, oh, that looks so 90s, because it's a completely different world. And now that I think about it, this is another protagonist who feels at odds with the world he lives in. And I'm starting to think I have a trend in the movies I like.
Camilla, how about you? Which movie are we talking about 75 years from now?
So I took this a little bit too literally. I thought like, oh, it has to be a movie released this year because that'll be in 75 years. So I was like, I kind of was thinking, but I think one that kind of fits in, at least with, I guess, apparently the ones I associate with Christmas, and I think is probably one I'll put on while I'm decorating next year when it's out on VOD or something, is I could see House of Gucci maybe being like reclassified as a Christmas movie. So that was my literal answer when I was scrambling. I'm like, what's been released this year? But I think my more kind of like Indy, who, thought of another kind of movie. I think something, and this is probably my hottest of hot takes, but I think a movie that will be talked about is Die Hard, because, and this is my hot take, we get it. It's a Christmas movie. It's not some undiscovered, like, oh, you're so kooky that you think Die Hard's a Christmas movie. Okay, everyone says it, but every year people act as if they're the first people that discovered that. And they're like,
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Like, I'm something of a, rogue movie person myself. And I say Die Hard's a Christmas movie. I saw it on the theater the day before Christmas Eve. They were airing it at Garneau a few years ago, specifically because it's a Christmas movie. Okay, we get it. So talk about it in 75 years. Yeah, it is. Don't. It's. My hot take is that it's not a hot take. Okay, it's not a personality feature either. Okay, settle down. Sorry for everyone else. That is.
I'm quietly applauding over here.
Oh,
yeah, absolutely. I'm tired of that conversation. You're not rocking the boat by saying Die Hard's a Christmas movie. Yeah, there's Christmas in it. Cool.
Yeah,
movie,
and people act as if they've like discovered the Holy Grail. Like this is some kind of like absolutely unorthodox idea, and they might be shamed for it, so they'll kind of like whisper it, like, what? No thanks.
Caroline, how about you? Which Christmas movie are we covering 75 years from now?
Muppet Christmas Carol, because I firmly believe that this coming mid-century period will belong to the Muppets.
Here's hoping.
Yeah. Can I also, as along with the Muppets Christmas Carol, there is I think maybe not up to me, a little known, there was a TV movie, The Home for Christmas. Watch out for the icy patch. Of course, Caroline. Of course, we would have had.
It is Muppet.
Childhood.
Yes, Camilla, thank you so much for setting me up on this. It's called Muppet Family Christmas, and it features the Muppets, the Fraggles, the Sesame Street Muppets, and the Muppet Babies all together.
It was my absolute favorite growing up, and then of course, like, there's that period. There was a period, obviously, when I was like junior high school. I mean, we had the internet, but not that kind of like ubiquitous, like I'll just Google a memory and there's, a YouTube video of it. And I couldn't find it. And I just was like, watch out for the icy patch. That's literally the only element of that thing that I found. And a dear friend of mine in high school had it. She had it on VHS and I'd never been happier. And yeah, it's a great one.
I grew up calling it Miss Piggy Christmas because that is what my parents taped it off of TV with the commercials, and on the VHS they wrote Miss Piggy Christmas because you didn't always know what things were called, and so like that when I had that realization of, oh, that's not what the world calls this, it was good because I got to validate that with other Muppet fans. Highly, highly recommend.
For me, I think we're going to be covering Home Alone. I think just with the amount of physical comedy in that movie, I think it's not going to. I think that type of stuff is kind of timeless. It's people getting hit in the groin, getting nailed with paint cans. That will never not be funny. And it's funny because that movie came out in like 1990, so it's like 30 years old now, which is crazy to me. But that movie too, even though it came out in 1990, it does kind of have a little bit of a timeless feel to it. Like if you went to a mall in 1990, you're seeing people wearing like, I don't know, Zubaz and fluorescent colors. You don't get that. You just get a lot of kind of very comfortable, like the red and green Christmas colors everywhere. The home looks, really nice for the holidays. So yeah, I think that's one that won't go out of style anytime soon.
I think the only kind of anachronistic or, a non-timeless is that Home Alone now, they would have had a Google Nest type device, spoke through the Google Nest. Hey, Kevin, whoops, we've left you, like, hang tight. We've got a cheap Ryanair flight back. No problem. Yeah, we'll be there in a bit. Just we'll lock the doors so you won't worry. We can lock the doors from Paris. You're safe. We've set the alarm.
Indy and Camilla, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we go, is there anything that you would like to plug for our listeners?
Well, sure. I'm with the literacy van here at EPL for the most part. We're not up and running at the moment, but at the Children's Library, we're doing all sorts of virtual programming from our Sing, Sign, Laugh, and Learn classes. I'm doing some 3D printing classes for children online. So even if you're not willing to come into the library at the moment, we can still do some programming. And of course, if you can come in, the space is beautiful. So come see me at the Children's Library. And I also have a podcast that I host with my partner, Samantha. It's called I Love This, You Should Too. And we both have very different tastes in film. So we take turns bringing one to the other, and then we talk about it. So if you want to hear a grown man get overly emotional about Into the Spider-Verse, this is a great podcast for you. And this entire month, like every December, we're doing all Christmas stuff. And my pick, Caroline, was A Muppet Christmas Carol, or The Muppet Christmas Carol, rather. So you can find that wherever you're listening to this.
Camilla, anything coming up you want listeners to know about?
Yeah, just keep checking out our website for our Book Clubs of EPL program. So we have moved to virtual meetups, but we have two kind of different types of book clubs in terms of the books, how you get your books. So we do have Book Clubs of EPL where you can sign up and you will get a physical copy of the book put on hold for you so you can read it, return it, and then no change from our old book clubs like that, but we'll just meet up virtually. And then we have another type of book club where the book itself is a digital copy, so an ebook or an e-audio book of the title, and there are no holds. You don't have to wait for it, and then we will meet up virtually to discuss.
Sounds great. And we will have links to where you can find out more information on Book Clubs of EPL and about the Children's Library and all of our programming in our item list. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Make sure that you've subscribed so that you automatically get our new episodes. Please also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We love getting reviews. And as always, if you like what you heard, please tell a friend about the show.
Yeah, and don't forget that we'll have a link to everything that we talked about in today's show notes. If you want to share your favorite It's a Wonderful Life moment with us, email us at podcast@epl.ca or hit us up on Twitter by using the hashtag EPL Overdue Finds. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.